The undercard for the Dmitry Bivol versus Artur Beterbiev undisputed light heavyweight fight in Riyadh on June 1 is a very English affair. Although that fight is two Russian guys, this is a battle underneath of Britain between Eddie Hearn and his Matchroom promotional company and Frank Warren and his Queensberry company. And this rivalry goes back, I think, almost 30 years and 2 generations to back when Frank and Eddie's dad, Barry, were originally partners working together on events and then rivals. And that has carried on and certainly grown, become a bit more spiteful over the years, to the point where even sort of second generation and even third generation, with George Warren, who's very quiet and avoids the limelight, and Frank Smith, who is sort of Eddie's protege, his second in command, having to carry on this this sort of corporate battle. We never ever thought it would come to a head, because I think up until Saudi Arabia's involvement in the sport and these shows being sort of put together, they'd only ever been in a room once together. I think a meeting run by the British Boxing Board of Control, they might have very briefly touched hands, shook hands, but they'd never had a proper conversation. They'd never dealt with each other. They'd never had a meal. They came close a couple of years ago, I think just after we come out of lockdown, but to no avail. But now they're going to, have a shootout. And Eddie chose 2 weight classes. Frank chose 2 weight classes. And then Turki Al Sheikh, the Saudi Arabian boxing power broker, picked the last. So we have 2 sets of heavyweight contests. We have a light heavyweight contest. We have a middleweight contest. And we have a featherweight contest. On Frank's team, we have Zhilei Zhang, who's just beat Joe Joyce twice, but then lost to Joseph Parker. And he'll be taking on Eddie's wild card, Deontay Wilder. Frank's star heavyweight after Tyson Fury is Daniel Dubois, and he'll be taking on Croatia's Filip Hrgovic, who's been mandatory challenger for the IBF heavyweight world title that Alexander Usyk currently owns for almost 2 years now. And we'll come back to that and how important that is. The light heavyweight contest is between Craig Richards, who is Eddie Hearn's man and has been for a long time, and is probably his only sort of real long-term Matchroom homegrown talent. And he'll be taking on Willie Hutchinson, who is Frank's Scottish light heavyweight man. Down at middleweight, one of Frank's real shining stars, who he's pushed since day one, and he's made his captain, is Hamza Shiraz. And he'll be taking on Austin Ammo Williams from America, representing Eddie and Matchroom. And then down at featherweight is Liverpool's Nick Ball, boxing for Queensberry and Frank, who come incredibly close to winning the WBC featherweight title out in Saudi Arabia when he went the distance with Ray Vargas and got a controversial draw. And he'll be going up against Ryan Ford, who has the WBA world title in that division. So it was almost a unification fight, but sadly isn't to be. And the format is that the captains, which is Hamza Shiraz for Frank Warren and Queensberry, and Deontay Wilder for Eddie and Matchroom, they get double points. The point system is you get 1 point for a points win, 2 points for a stoppage win, and nil points for a draw. So then your captain gets double points. So there could be a scenario where Frank Warren wins 4 fights on points, but if Deontay Wilder, Eddie's captain, wins by a trademark spectacular knockout, it would be 4-4. And despite sitting down with Eddie and Frank today, we don't know yet what would happen if it was a draw. And the way they are pulling things out of the hat at the minute, the mind boggles at what they might do if it ends in an unlikely draw. Point systems and leagues in a boxing format is not completely brand new. We've had it before with the World Boxing Series, where you do have teams who score points, but it's difficult to arrange. And even with the World Boxing Super Series, when you had to have guys come together, you're asking rival promoters, rival broadcasters, and the 4 sanctioning bodies to all work together, and they are always the stumbling blocks and the reasons that fights don't happen. So it's a rare occurrence, and especially in the heavyweight division where the most power and influence and money is washing around. So it's only happened because of Saudi Arabia's involvement and bank balance. Eddie and Frank are the two lead promoters, because Deontay Wilder is definitely not a Matchroom man officially. He's a wild card. And even Filip Hrgovic, I wouldn't really class as an Eddie Hearn man. We spoke to him earlier, and he sort of said as much. Those two are working together for Saudi Arabia. So it's all in one night. It will be cut and dry. Whereas I think in previous attempts to do a league or a point scoring system, it's just too difficult and too complicated. This is a much more simplified version of it. When you think about the rivalry between Eddie and Frank, it is, they are two English gentlemen who are, entrenched in British sports. Matchroom not only do boxing, but they do the darts and the snooker most famously. They're both impeccably dressed, Savile Row suits. Frank's a massive Arsenal fan. It's a London rivalry, perhaps, not just a British one. But when you look at the teams that they're both putting out, Eddie has one British fighter in South London's Craig Richards, who he has had for a long time. But Filip Hrgovic is Croatian. Ray Ford is American. Ammo Williams is American. And Deontay Wilder is American. So his team, 1 out of the 5 is British. And one of the questions that we had, Frank and Eddie sat down with us earlier, was, does that changes stuff, I think, really, because, listen, it's a global event in Saudi Arabia, and there was never any rules where they had to be all British. But the British boxing fans who have grown up with this rivalry will be the York Hall fans or the Wembley Stadium, the Wembley Arena fans, the old Docklands, even Leeds Arena, the MEN, Liverpool's Echo Arena. And I think that there is going to be something missing from the fact that it's not really, I don't want to say all British, because that's not fair, but essentially Frank is still very much a UK promoter who focuses on homegrown fighters. Eddie's biggest fans and Matchroom fans will rightly say Eddie's branched out and he's a global promoter who takes fights all around the world. But I think Eddie's critics and Frank's fans will say this proves that there is only one leading UK promoter, and that's Frank Warren. So, like with all of these things, they've both divided the sport. Frank's fans are diehard Frank fans, and they don't like Eddie and Matchroom, and it's the same on the other side. Eddie's fans buy Matchroom tickets for shows, whether it's a world champion on the top of the bill or a young prospect on the next gen show. So, yeah, I think every fight is good, and even British fans who maybe don't know Ray Ford too much or Emma Williams too much, they're excellent boxers, and the matchups are great, and they're hard to pick. But I do think something has been slightly lost, because I would imagine most casual boxing fans, and that's who these shows are trying to appeal to, they will be sitting there thinking, why doesn't Eddie have a Lee Wood in that featherweight fight with Nick Ball, or even a Josh Warrington? And I know they're trying to fight each other, but I just think, I think fans will sometimes a few fans will look at that and just maybe feel like something is missing, that because there's such English men running traditionally English businesses with fights up and down the UK every weekend, that it's maybe a bit of a curveball. That although the fights are great for boxing fans, I'm not sure if boxing fans will view this as this final 5v5 between Eddie and Frank, because I don't think they'll recognise some of the guys as Eddie Hearn fighters very much, or certainly Matchroom fighters. I think Hamza Shiraz will beat Ammo Williams well. I think on form and achievements, you've got to back Ray Ford to beat Nick Ball. I think Hrgovic at 31 with almost no miles on the clock, I think he beats Dubois. I think Zhang Wilder, I have no idea. I have utterly no idea what goes on there. Again, on form, you got to say Zhang. Really got to say Zhang on form. I know he was poor in the second half of the Parker fight, got 2 knockdowns and then did a little dance and then ran out of energy. And then that leaves Craig Richards against Willie Hutchinson. And on form, Richardson, great fight with Bivol, or a good performance against Bivol. A great fight with Josh Buatsi. And Willie Hutchinson, we haven't seen anything like that. We've seen a defeat to Lennox Clark. So I didn't plan that, but off the top of my head right now, it looks to me like an Eddie Hearn 3-2 win. But incredibly close and incredibly excited.